Excerpts from Chapter 3 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Summary of omitted portion. After getting in trouble with Miss Caroline for defending Walter Cunningham, Scout catches and beats him up on the playground out of spite. Jem stops her and invites Walter over for dinner as an apology. Jem ran to the kitchen and asked Calpurnia to set an extra plate. We had company. Atticus greeted Walter and began a discussion about crops neither Jem nor I could follow.
"Reason I can't pass the first grade, Mr. Finch, is I've had to stay out every spring and help Papa with the choppin', but there's another at the house now that's field size."
Walter asked for molasses and poured syrup on his vegetables and meat with a generous hand. He would probably have poured it into his milk glass had I not asked what the Sam Hill he was doing. The silver saucer clattered when he replaced the pitcher, and he quickly put his hands in his lap. Then he ducked his head. Atticus shook his head at me again.
"But he's gone and drowned his dinner in syrup," I protested. "He's poured it all over."
It was then that Calpurnia requested my presence in the kitchen. She was furious. When she squinted down at me, the tiny lines around her eyes deepened.
"There's some folks who don't eat like us," she whispered fiercely, "but you ain't called on to contradict 'em at the table when they don't. That boy's your company, and if he wants to eat up the tablecloth, you let him, you hear?" "He ain't company, Cal. He's just a Cunningham." "Hush your mouth. Don't matter who they are. Anybody sets foot in this house is your company, and don't you let me catch you remarkin' on their ways like you was so high and mighty. Your folks might be better'n the Cunninghams, but it don't count for nothin' the way you're disgracin' 'em. If you can't act fit to eat at the table, you can just set here and eat in the kitchen."
Calpurnia sent me through the swinging door to the dining room with a stinging smack. I retrieved my plate and finished dinner in the kitchen, thankful, though, that I was spared the humiliation of facing them again. When Scout returns to school, Miss Caroline causes a scene when she screams at lice crawling out of a student's hair. Some of the other students attempt to calm her, while he tries to get it out of his hair. Miss Caroline watched the process in horrid fascination. Little Chuck brought water in a paper cup, and she drank it gratefully. Finally, she found her voice. "What is your name, son?" she asked softly. The boy blinked. "Who, me?" Miss Caroline nodded. "Burris Ewell." Miss Caroline inspected her roll book. "I have a Ewell here, but I don't have a first name. Would you spell your first name for me?" "Don't know how. They call me Burris to home." "Well, Burris," said Miss Caroline, "I think we'd better excuse you for the rest of the afternoon. I want you to go home and wash your hair." From her desk, she produced a thick volume, leafed through its pages, and read for a moment. "A good home remedy for... Burris, I want you to go home and wash your hair with lye soap. When you've done that, treat your scalp with kerosene." "What for, missus?" "To get rid of the, cooties. You see, Burris, the other children might catch them, and you wouldn't want that, would you?" The boy stood up. He was the filthiest human I had ever seen. His neck was dark gray, the backs of his hands were rusty, and his fingernails were black deep into the quick. "And Burris," said Miss Caroline, "please bathe yourself before you come back tomorrow." The boy laughed rudely. "You ain't sendin' me home, missus. I was on the verge of leavin'. I done my time for this year." Miss Caroline looked puzzled. "What do you mean by that?" The boy did not answer. He gave a short, contemptuous snort. One of the elderly members of the class answered her. "He's one of the Ewells, ma'am." And I wondered if this explanation would be as unsuccessful as my attempt. But Miss Caroline seemed willing to listen. "Whole school's full of 'em. They come first day every year and then leave. The truant lady gets 'em here 'cause she threatens 'em with the sheriff, but she's give up trying to hold 'em. She reckons she's carried out the law just getting their names on the roll and running 'em here the first day. You're supposed to mark 'em absent the rest of the year." Burris Ewell was flattered by the recital. "Been coming to the first day of the first grade for 3 years now," he said expansively. "Reckon if I'm smart this year, they'll promote me to the second." Miss Caroline said, "Sit back down, please, Burris." And the moment she said it, I knew she had made a serious mistake. The boy's condescension flashed to anger. "You try and make me, missus." Little Chuck Little got to his feet.
"Let him go, ma'am," he said. "He's a mean one, a hard-down mean one. He's liable to start something, and there's some little folks here."
The boy snorted and slouched leisurely to the door. Safely out of range, he turned and shouted, "Report and be damned to ye! Ain't no snot-nosed slut of a school-teacher ever born can make me do nothin'. You ain't making me go nowhere, missus. You just remember that. You ain't making me go nowhere." He waited until he was sure she was crying. Then he shuffled out of the building. "Something wrong, Scout?" I told Atticus I didn't feel very well, and didn't think I'd go to school anymore if it was all right with him. Atticus sat down in the swing and crossed his legs. His fingers wandered to his watch pocket. He said that was the only way he could think. He waited in amiable silence, and I sought to reinforce my position. "You never went to school, and you do all right, so I'll just stay home too. You can teach me like Granddaddy taught you and Uncle Jack." "No, I can't," said Atticus. "I have to make a living. Besides, they'd put me in jail if I kept you at home. Dose of magnesia for you tonight, and school tomorrow." "I'm feeling all right, really." "Thought so. Now, what's the matter?" Bit by bit, I told him the day's misfortunes.
"And she said you taught me all wrong, so we can't ever read any more, ever. Please don't send me back, please, sir."
Atticus stood up and walked to the end of the porch. When he completed his examination of the wisteria vine, he strolled back to me. "First of all," he said, "if you can learn a simple trick, Scout, you'll get along a lot better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view."
"Sir?"
"Until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." Atticus said I had learned many things today, and Miss Caroline had learned several things herself. She had learned not to hand something to a Cunningham, for one thing, but if Walter and I had put ourselves in her shoes, we'd have seen it was an honest mistake on her part. We could not expect her to learn all Macomb's ways in one day, and we could not hold her responsible when she knew no better. "I'll be dogged," I said. "I didn't know no better than not to read to her, and she held me responsible. Listen, Atticus, I don't have to go to school." I was bursting with a sudden thought. "Burris Ewell, remember? He just goes to school the first day. The truant lady reckons she's carried out the law when she gets his name on the roll." "You can't do that, Scout," Atticus said. "Sometimes it's better to bend the law a little in special cases. In your case, the law remains rigid. So, to school you must go." "I don't see why I have to when he doesn't." "Then listen." Atticus said the Ewells had been the disgrace of Macomb for 3 generations. They were people, but they lived like animals. They can go to school any time they want to, when they show the faintest symptom of wanting an education, said Atticus. There are ways of keeping them in school by force, but it's silly to force people like the Ewells into a new environment. If I didn't go to school tomorrow, you'd force me to. Let's leave it at this, said Atticus dryly. You, Miss Scout Finch, are of the common folk. You must obey the law. He said that the Ewells were members of an exclusive society made up of Ewells. In certain circumstances, the common folk judiciously allowed them certain privileges by the simple method of becoming blind to some of the Yule's activities. They didn't have to go to school, for one thing. Another thing, Mr. Bob Yule, Burris's father, was permitted to hunt and trap out of season.
Atticus, that's bad, I said.
In Macomb County, hunting out of season was a misdemeanor at law, a capital felony in the eyes of the populace. It's against the law, all right, said my father, and it's certainly bad, but when a man spends his relief checks on green whiskey, his children have a way of crying from hunger pains. I don't know of any landowner around here who begrudges those children any game their father can hit.
Mr. Yule shouldn't do that.
Of course he shouldn't, but he'll never change his ways. Are you going to take out your disapproval on his children?
No, sir, I murmured,
and made a final stand.
But if I keep on going to school, we can't ever read any more.
That's really bothering you, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
When Atticus looked down at me, I saw the expression on his face that always made me expect something. Do you know what a compromise is? He asked.
Bending the law?
No, an agreement reached by mutual concessions. It works this way, he said. If you'll concede the necessity of going to school, we'll go on reading every night, just as we always have. Is it a bargain?
Yes, sir.
We'll consider it sealed, without the usual formality, Atticus said when he saw me preparing to spit.